God here, and welcome to the Gods of Odds, hosted by two of my favorites, Brad Hoyseth and Dave Daba.
Welcome to the Gods of Odds. It is week number 4 of your National Football League season. That is Brad Hoyseth over there in beautiful Southern California. I'm Dave Daba up in Northern California. I am so proud, Brad, of the Gods of Odds. I will say this, you'll have a slightly different take on this than I do. But over the last 2 weeks, one of the Gods of Odds in week 2 went 7 for 10 and went 5 for 5 on his own pick. In week 3, another one of the Gods of Odds that happens to be wearing purple on his head today went 7 for 10. We've had 2 absolutely fantastic weeks when it comes to picks. Mr. Hoyseth, what is the most surprising thing that you've seen in the National Football League in the first 4 weeks of the season?
Well, I don't think everybody thought that the young quarterbacks that everybody had heard about during the offseason, Justin Fields, Zach Wilson, Trevor Lawrence, I think people had much higher expectations for those 3 kids than what has been delivered so far. I mean, combined, they've thrown 8 touchdowns and they've thrown 15 interceptions. And they've been terrible. I mean, quite frankly, Trevor Lawrence has been awful. Zach Wilson has been more awful. And Justin Fields just really never got a chance. I mean, he had guys all over him all weekend long for the Bears. Their offensive line just not able to protect him. So this has been kind of an ongoing conversation you and I have had over the first few weeks. It started out with whether or not Justin Fields should play or whether he shouldn't. I kind of thought maybe that he shouldn't play because they just don't have any guys around him. But I think it's pretty clear that so far in those 3 games, Andy Dalton's been the better quarterback in Chicago. And I know that hurts you, Dave. I know it hurts you.
I knew
Andy Dalton's been the better and most prepared quarterback of the 2.
I knew you were going to go to the Andy Dalton card for sure. One other thing that I was really hoping to see this week is Bill Belichick force Mac Jones, continue the hazing of Mac Jones and force him to go back to number 50 on his jersey number, as he did at the start of the preseason and then training camp. Real quick, for those of you that are joining the Gods of Odds for the very first time, we pick the top 10 games worth actually spending some money on every week. Brad goes out and he picks 5. I pick 5. We combine them and we throw it all together into a weekly show. We are in season 2, Mr. Hoyseth, of the Gods of Odds. I did just want to mention that to everybody, but also to say Justin Fields was beyond disappointing last week. And for all of the things I've said in the past a couple weeks about Justin Fields and Matt Nagy, I just simply don't know what to make of what they're trying to accomplish or not accomplish in Chicago, because it was just an absolute disaster there. And one other thing I wanted to mention, Brad, which should make you feel good, as for the 3rd week in a row, you're wearing your Los Angeles Rams blue shirt, and that is your royal blue, Mr. Hoyseth, is to say that I may have been a little harsh on one Matthew Stafford. The performance that Matthew Stafford put on last week was one of the best quarterback performances I've seen outside of the whiny one, Aaron Rodgers, so far this season in the National Football League. And I was very impressed by both sides of the field in Los Angeles. And if you were to say to me, Dave, who's the best National Football League team today? I would be disappointed with anybody that had Kansas City in their top 3 to begin with. And I would say that the best team in the National Football League entering week 4, based on what's happened so far in the season, is the Los Angeles Rams.
Yeah, I don't think you would have a lot of people that would argue with that. I mean, you could make a case maybe for a couple of other teams, and I've heard, people out there also. Sorry about that. The phone just occasionally rings, Dave. That's how we take care of that. But I've heard also a lot of conversation on who's the early MVP, which I think is just ridiculous conversation at this point in the season.
It ain't Matt Nagy, I can tell you that.
No. Well, the most valuable player, I think there's a lot of guys you could make a case for. There's a lot of teams that have started, I think better than people expect. How about the Denver Broncos? What about Teddy Bridgewater? I mean, the guy's played really good football. Your boy Sam Darnold, I know that's not going to get any play, right? A couple of the young defensive kids that are playing for the Cowboys, I think, have played really well. You've turned the corner on the Rams. I may be turning the corner on the Cowboys. I think, I've seen some pretty good play out of the Cowboys now for 3 straight weeks, and clearly they've got to be the favorites in the NFC East. From a talent standpoint, they've got a lot of it. And, Dak Prescott's playing out of his mind. I think he would have to be considered an MVP candidate at this point, even though they've got a loss. But there's so many guys out there, and I think we're still 6-8 weeks away from really, coming close to having an early favorite, I would think.
Yeah, I will say this for those people that know, I picked the Cowboys last year to win it all, and I suffered throughout the entire season with the patheticness of Mike McCarthy as a head coach in the National Football League. And it even carried over into their win against what I'm not even sure should be described as a National Football League team, in how poorly the Philadelphia Eagles actually played last week. I like to take like this Cowboy run with a bit of a grain of salt, and to say, they played, they barely got by the Los Angeles Chargers. But that is a good football team. I think we would agree that the Los Angeles Chargers are a good football team. The Philadelphia Eagles, come on, like they're at a fight at the bottom of the barrel this year. And the defense in Dallas is, they're doing what they're supposed to do against the teams they're supposed to beat, which is what they didn't do last year. So that's a huge improvement. And I always say good coaching matters, and sometimes good coaching isn't just the head coach; it's the assistant coaches. And Dan Quinn, in his first couple of seasons with the Atlanta Falcons, had the Atlanta Falcons defense, heading in the right direction, and then eventually lost them. So, a lot of times a new leader comes into a team and they have that effect on that team in the first year or two that they're there. I think that's what's happening with Dan Quinn as the defensive coordinator. And for all intensive purposes, Brad is really the head coach of that Dallas Cowboy team at this point.
Well, let's jump into it. One gigantic mistake I made last week, and Dave kind of reminded me of it most of the weekend. I must have gotten about 15 texts about how could you have possibly taken the Jets, right? I mean, wow, the Jets. I don't think there's any doubt that's a clear-cut favorite as the worst team in football. I picked 5 games this week where I thought, I had one really good team and one really bad team. And so no better place to start than with the Titans at the Jets. And the Titans are a 7-point favorite. And, right now I'm not as comfortable with this pick as I was 48 hours ago in hearing that, A.J. Brown is maybe not going to play, and Julio Jones might not play. But then all I have to do is roll back tape of the Jets last week, and I feel a lot more comfortable. I see a big day for Derrick Henry. The Titans defense isn't very good, but you don't have to be very good against the Jets. The Titans are -7. I'm going to take Tennessee. I'm going to give the points.
Yeah, I would say pretty much everybody in America will agree with you. Look, this Jets team, Brad, is actually getting worse. They're not getting better. 14 points in their first game of the season. Their second game of the season, they scored a whopping 6 points. And in their third game of the season against two glove Teddy Bridgewater, they 0 points against the Broncos, which I think we all agree has a really solid defense, probably underrated. Coming into the season, Von Miller really does look like he's back, and that defense is playing really well in Denver. But 0 points in a National Football League for what is just absolutely unacceptable. I texted a different buddy last night, and I was like, and I put a note into our sheet here about this. If the Jets could find a way to score less than 0 points in this game, they would. That is absolutely how bad this Jets team is playing. And I do want to say this. I mean, you see Sam Darnold in Carolina. I hate to use the word flourish. But if you compare what happened to him in New York and what's happening to him in Carolina, there is a little bit of, and I'm going to make up a word here, flourishment going on with Sam Darnold at this point. It is a bad New York Jets organization, and I think it starts at the ownership level and is continuing to seep down.
Yeah, and the Titans, I was pretty high on them at the beginning of the season. I thought they were a pretty good team, and then, they just completely laid an egg in week one. And they kind of seem like they're starting to figure it out a little bit. And they're not very good defensively. But this Jets team is just so bad, Dave. And, I've said it so many times that, let's not overthink this thing. You have a really good team and you have a really bad team. There's no reason to overthink it. Even though the game is in New York is hosting, it's really not a home game anyway. So, I see Tennessee going in there and controlling the fate of that game from the outset.
Yeah, I agree. All right, so moving on. Speaking of games that I agree you shouldn't be overthinking this week, I do want to point this out real quick. Brad got his picks in first, and so how we do this is, we each pick 5 games, and we got a worksheet, and Brad puts them on there, or I put them on there first. Brad was at least 48 hours ahead of me this week, in getting his picks. Brad picked the easiest games in North America by far. I had to pick some of the more difficult ones, but there was one that was just an obvious no-brainer, and this is the Jaguars at the Bengals. And I can't believe I'm saying it is an obvious no-brainer if you look at the head coach of this Cincinnati Bengals team, who as a head coach in his first 2 seasons in the National Football League, Zach Taylor, 6-25-1. I repeat, 6 wins, 25 losses, and 1 tie. And yet they are 7.5-point favorites at home against the Jaguars. And I feel so strongly about this pick. It's the second pick on our list that I feel strongly just about. It's an absolute no-brainer to me. Joe Burrow looks really pretty strong. He's getting rid of the ball a lot faster. I think he understands that while his offensive line is improving, he does need to protect himself, and so he's doing a better job there. And the defense is playing significantly better than a lot of us thought they were going to play this year. Urban Meyers is an absolute disaster. I'm wondering if he'll ever win a game as a head coach in the National Football League. Trevor Lawrence will be fine once the Urban Meyer regime is done. That is, unless the Jacksonville Jaguars decide to bring in Adam Gase as their new head coach. By the way, in case people don't know, where is Adam Gase today? I was curious, Brad, and I went look at what happened to Adam Gase. He's actually coaching at a high school right now. He is completely out of the National Football League. Colleges wouldn't talk to him, and he got a job at a high school as a football coach.
That's a fall from grace, is it not? Well, I'm with you on this. I don't think we need to spend a ton of time on it. The Bengals are a 7.5-point favorite. I said the Jets were the worst team in football. If there's a 1A and a 1B, I think clearly the Jaguars would fit into the 1B category. They actually had a lead in that game. They returned this long field goal attempt, 108 or 9 yards for a touchdown, and they had the lead. And man, the crowd was going crazy. And I have never seen a lead disappear so quickly as it did in that game last week. The Bengals, I think they're an interesting team. They've got some really good offensive weapons when you think about Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase. And I think the running back, Joe Mixon, is a really talented football player. And I get a sense that there's a positive vibe in Cincinnati, which is not something you've been able to say for a long time. When you look at that division, really, they might be a better team right now than the Steelers, Dave. And but we're going to talk about that coming up later. And you know what I got to go with there. But anyways, the Bengals 7.5-point favorites. I don't really like that extra half point at all. I have a hard time betting on the Bengals as a favorite, let alone 7.5. But it is the Jaguars, and they're pretty sad looking bunch of characters right now. So I'm going to take the Bengals minus the 7.5.
Yeah, I mean, especially when the head coach of the Bengals has already met his quota for wins for the year, based on his past experiences. All right, Mr. Orsov, let's move on to the next game.
Okay, I said I was going to talk about the Steelers. We might as well go right into that. Pittsburgh is at Green Bay. The Packers are a 7-point favorite. And ordinarily, my theory would be good team, bad team. But I think this is the case of one time maybe you have to throw it out. And the reason is I'm not sure the Packers are a great team yet. I'm really not. They beat the Lions, who aren't very good. They went and they looked pretty good in San Francisco, but I would call it anything but a great performance. And of course, we all know what happened to them in week 1. And the Steelers have just not been good. I mean, they can't protect Ben anymore. They've got now injury problems with Deontay Johnson and I think it might be Juju Smith-Schuster. They might both kind of be questionable for that game. But I get a sense that the Steelers are kind of backed into a corner. They're kind of like a rabid dog right now, and you're going to have to get your best out of them this weekend. They understand they're kind of up against it. They're a resilient franchise who always seems to, when you want to count them dead, come out and play good football. And I just think with 7 points, that's a lot. And so I'm going to take the Steelers. And I know you're going to think I'm crazy on that, but I'm going to take the Steelers in the 7 points.
Yeah, I absolutely. Originally, when I saw this and saw that you took the Steelers, I was ready to, ship you out some candy to say thank you for this victory. But I like. I love Mike Tomlin, Brad. You know that. And I believe Mike Tomlin's still going to find a way to go 8-8 at some point this year with the disaster that they have. I saw Mike Tomlin interview, last night, and just his leadership, Brad. I mean, look. The Steelers should have they should have retired Roethlisberger probably 2 years ago. and they didn't. And they should have at least addressed it with a real future quarterback living underneath him, and they didn't do it. And so it's an organizational sort of failure. I talked, I think, maybe in the first or second week about how bad their offensive line is. We say a lot of that about offensive lines in the National Football League, but this is not a good offensive line at all when it comes to pass protection. In this particular game, you're going up against the Achilles heel of this Green Bay Packer team, their entire defense at this point. A defense that is has not fully bought in yet to the post Mike Pettin era in Green Bay. So I sort of looked at this, and as I thought about it, I thought, oh, this is going to be a little closer than I feel comfortable with it being. And I thought about flipping, and then I went back and I watched some of the ungodly passes by Aaron Rodgers. And I looked at it and I said, and Roethlisberger is he's done. They might retire him at halftime. I mean, he's done, but Pittsburgh will stay in this game because Najee Harris, if you play fantasy football and he's on your team, this is a good time to play him this week, because I think he's going to get a lot of carries, and it's pretty much the only thing that Roethlisberger can do is throw a screen pass at this point. But I do like the Packers in this nonetheless.
Well, I think the Packers are a better football team. I think the Packers are going to win the game. I don't think the Steelers are very good. I just get a sense that they're going to play really, really hard this week because that's what the Steelers do. And Mike Tomlin has had a great way of motivating that team for a number of years now. I think he's the perfect guy for that city to be a coach. He fits the mentality of the Steel City perfectly.
Yeah.
And I just get a sense that, they're kind of like a dog that's backed into a corner. They have to come out biting. They have to come out fighting. Otherwise, you're looking down the road and it's starting to look like a long road if you don't at least have a good performance.
Yeah. And, sometimes the wheels on the bus come off the bus. They stop going round and round, Brad. And
we've tried to put that team to rest for a number of years, them and the Patriots both, and they just keep hanging around.
They just keep hanging around. And that's why, I said, 8-8 wouldn't surprise me if they pieced it together. I just, I think the Packers are just, the Packers are definitely going to win this game. There's no doubt there, but they're just riding too high. I think they're going to stick it to the Steelers. All right, moving on. Brad, I'm going to go with the Panthers at the Cowboys next. Cowboys are favored by 4.5 points. We talked a little bit earlier about Dan Quinn. You can talk about Trayvon Diggs all you want, or Micah Parsons, who statistically isn't as good as he looks on the field, but has played well. This Dallas Cowboy team with Dak Prescott, the fact that the Carolina Panthers have a ton of injuries. McCaffrey at last check was out this week. Too much pressure is going to go on Sam Darnold's shoulders. I will say the Carolina Panther defense is vastly improved. This will not be a cakewalk. This will not be a Dallas Cowboy win by 21 points. Do I think they're going to cover the spread of 4.5 points? Yes. But it is not going to be an Eagle repeat that we saw last week.
Yeah, and I'm in agreement with you. As I said at the top of the show, the Cowboys are starting to make a believer out of me. And I always knew they had good talent on offense. But the last couple of years, their defense has been atrocious. And this year, the two young kids, like you mentioned, Parsons and, of course, Diggs, I think they've really infused a lot of energy into that defense. They're a lot better football team on the defensive side of the ball. They're making plays all over the field, and they needed that. They needed that a lot, the Cowboys. I think Dan Quinn has helped a lot. And so the Panthers are coming in a little dinged up. I think if there's a team that's 3-0 that people are going to say isn't real, I think most would probably agree that would maybe be the Panthers. Even though Darnold's had a great start, they've played well, and their defense is really solid. But offensively, if you take McCaffrey out of that offense, they're not the same kind of team. And the Cowboys, I think, just have far too much firepower. I thought 4.5 was a really low line. I took the Cowboys as well.
Yeah, I saw Sam Darnold in the post game press conference or post game interview, not press conference, on the field interview with the NFL Network crew, and I think I texted you. Steve Smith Senior is the best. He's the best. He's the best impromptu sort of interviewer guy, and he's totally happy about making fun of people that he's interviewing, and they deserve it, because Sam Darnold had the traditional sports cliche that he rolled out. I'm not going to get into what it was. I got a different podcast for that if you haven't seen it. And it was just ridiculous, but I have to say, Brad, I'm pleasantly surprised by the way Sam Darnold has started to play. I still feel like he's living in a fog at this point. Anyways, let's move on to the next game.
All right. Well, speaking of a team in the fog, you mentioned them earlier, the Eagles, and I've got the Chiefs at the Eagles. Chiefs are a -7 as a 7-point favorite, and this would almost be a game where you'd want to be a fly on the wall to see how the Eagles fans react to this game, because Philadelphia fans, unlike any other fans in the league, they can get really bitter. I mean, at one point, I remember the old Vet Stadium used to have a jail down below it for all the people that would get drunk and get in fights. They actually physically had a jail below the stadium because Eagle and Philadelphia fans can be so belligerent at times. They were known to have booed Santa Claus for 20 years. That was the old saying. And so the Chiefs, I think they need to find themselves. And I think that the Eagles are a good recipe to find yourself. And so I don't see this being a close football game. The Chiefs were a 7-point favorite. I think if they were playing better football, they might be an 11 or 12-point favorite. But I certainly think they're a touchdown better football team than the Eagles. I thought it was one of the easiest games of the week. I took the Chiefs -7.
Yeah, I don't have too much to say at this point on this game. Theoretically, if Philadelphia realizes and actually accepts and looks at the video of how other teams have played against the Chiefs defense, then they should be able to put up a couple touchdowns in this game and at least make it a little bit more interesting. I mean, if you think about it, the Chiefs defense versus the Dallas Cowboy defense, two different teams at different levels of defensive execution at this point. The Chiefs are not executing at all on defense. There's no pressure. The secondary is a bit of a mess. So I think like it wouldn't surprise me if this was a bit of a shootout through the first half of the game because of the defense, the defensive side of the ball there. But still, I will agree with you and take Kansas City. Patrick Mahomes, all the offensive weapons, etc. I do have one just quick note. Now, for those of you who have seen Nick Wright on Fox's First Things First show earlier in the week, he comes out with his weekly, contenders, top teams in the National Football League, Brad. And he has the absolute nerve to have the Kansas City Chiefs and the Los Angeles Rams as the two top teams in the National Football League after week 3. I'm sorry, but when Teddy Bridgewater and the Broncos are 3-0, you cannot have a team that's 1-2 be listed as one of the best teams in the National Football League so far this season. I understand that Nick Wright is a homer for the Kansas City Chiefs in the same way I'm a homer for the Minnesota Vikings. But at no point do I think the Vikings, who could easily be 3-0 off of just 2 different plays, and it's the same thing that Nick Wright is saying about the Kansas City Chiefs, should be anywhere in the top 10 discussion of teams in the National Football League this year. The answer is absolutely not. Please, North America, complain about Nick Wright and his Kansas City Chiefs. I just had to get that in.
I'm seeing the youngest coaching staff in the league in Philadelphia.
Yeah.
And they look like the youngest coaching staff in the league. They just, to me, they look overwhelmed. I don't see a lot of firepower on offense. It's either Jalen Hurts or bust.
Yeah.
You can only rely on so much on Dallas Goedert and Zach Ertz. Devonta Smith is a young kid. He's getting a lot of pressure put on him. Well, when the defense doesn't show up, the Eagles are in big trouble. And I find it hard to believe that Eagle defense is going to hold the Chiefs under 30.
Yeah.
And I just don't see the Eagles, offensively with a whole ton of talent. I don't see them putting up enough points. I see that as an easy win for the Chiefs. And maybe I come back here next week and, it's one of the disappointing games of the week, but I kind of feel like Kansas City needs a win. They need an impressive performance, and I think they'll get it this week.
Yeah. I think they'll be, I think Kansas City will be 2-2 next week, and still number 1 in Nick Wright's heart. Okay, so moving on. Let's see here, Brad. I'm going to go with the Raiders at the Los Angeles Chargers, a Monday night football game. Like we both, I finally converted you into a Justin Herbert fan. You finally see what I saw last year out of Justin Herbert. And in this particular game, the Chargers are 3.5-point favorites. And, Herbert on the road against the Kansas City Chiefs, 26 for 38, 281, 4 touchdowns, and a QB ranking of 125. Bring them home at beautiful SoFi Stadium for Monday Night Football. I'm just wondering, Brad, is this going to be a Raider home game, or will the city of San Diego show up to support the Chargers?
I think there's a lot of enthusiasm among both these fan bases, really. They're 2 exciting young teams. They're both apparently going in the right direction. And, both the quarterbacks are playing really solid football so far. I'm more of a believer in Justin Herbert than I am in Derek Carr. I think it's just a matter of time before Derek Carr, has one of those games where he throws 4 picks. But you didn't pick a winner in this one, Dave. Who are you taking?
Oh, I'm sorry, Brad. I thought I'm taking Justin Herbert and the Chargers. Do not. I believe it might not be 4 picks, but it will be 2 or 3, a fumble. There'll be all sorts of Raider mistakes this week. The real Raiders will show up this week. But what I was sort of curious about is how's this defense going to hold up against Herbert? And I just, when I looked at it on paper, I really like what what Las Vegas has done with their defense in the draft over the last couple of years. And their secondary is vastly improved. And they do have a decent 4-man rush. What I don't like is their schemes. And the Raiders are not blitzing enough. And if you're going to give Herbert just extra time to sit back in the pocket, he's going to pick you apart. So that's the Charger side of the ball for me. The other side of the ball is I think the lack of running game is going to finally bite the Raiders this week.
You could be right. But I'm going to go on the other side of this because I don't like that extra half point. I see both of these teams as always kind of getting themselves in a field goal game at the end. You know, how many close games have the Chargers had in the last 2 years? And the Raiders have had 3 close games now. And I just feel like this is destined to be another close game that could be decided on the final possession by a field goal. I do like what the Raiders are doing with Henry Ruggs this year. Last year when he was a rookie, it was just kind of let him go down the field, we'll throw it deep. Hopefully he catches it. But I'm seeing Ruggs get used a lot more along the sidelines, a lot more over the middle. He's becoming a much more complete wide receiver than he was as a rookie last year. And Derek Carr is throwing the ball to him a lot. So they finally got a different outlet other than Darren Waller. And I don't know whether or not Josh Jacobs is going to be healthy for this game or not. I have a sense maybe not. I haven't really checked the injury report on that. Do you know, Dave, is he out?
Yeah, I haven't. At last check, I thought he was. They were going to try to play him, but I haven't seen anything today.
Yeah, well, he didn't play last week, and it didn't seem to hurt him. So, I like the Raiders in this one. I'm gonna take that 3.5 points from you, Dave. I like both of these teams. I'm a huge Charger guy. I loved the Chargers when I was a kid, and Dan Fouts and all those guys. I've always loved their uniforms. I know you're not a big fan of the powder blue, but I'm going to take the Raiders. I'm going to take the silver and black, and I'm going to take that 3.5 points because I don't see either one of these teams blowing the other one out.
I'm totally a big fan of the powder blue now. I've totally converted to the powder blue. It also matches the cover of my favorite Premier League team, Manchester City. On that,
I can't believe you have a favorite Premier League team.
Oh, I had to. It's so much international conversations on the business side of the fence. Eventually I had to pick a team. So I went powder blue.
All right, I'm going to go into New Orleans next, where the Giants are visiting the Saints, and the Saints are a 7.5 point favorite. To me, this is an enthusiasm game. The Saints playing in their stadium for the first time, I believe, after having to go on the road because of the hurricanes and all that kind of stuff. I just don't think the Giants are a very good football team. I think that is maybe, we talked about it last week a little bit, that might be your leader in the clubhouse right now as a coach that gets fired first. It wouldn't surprise me at all if they don't start winning some games. And so I don't think the Giants are a very good team offensively. I think the Saints are very talented on the defensive side of the ball from week to week. And then you've got a streaky quarterback in Jameis Winston, and which guy is going to show up? Is it going to be the good one or the bad one? I say at home, in front of the home crowd, big game for the Saints. I think they want to get off on the right foot at home. I'm going to take the Saints. I don't like the 7.5, but I'm going to give the 7.5.
Yeah, Vegas knows what it's doing, right? They always do here. But with these Saints games, they've been just completely off against what the actual outcome has turned into, and so you sort of look at this game. Saints at home, Jameis Winston. The fans back in New Orleans. I mean, it's just and then you've got a football team in the New York Football Giants that are, really under a lot of pressure at this point. And you would think, this must be the end of Daniel Jones, right? I mean, it's either going to be the end of Daniel Jones or the end of their head coach. And it's just, Daniel Jones is a bit of the problem here. Saquon Barkley is coming back nicely. It's taken a little bit of time to get there. He's not all the way back yet. But I mean, come on, this is like an easy game to pick. The Saints are going to kill the Giants. The Giants are currently in the battle between the Eagles, the Falcons, the Texans. I'm not including my Detroit Lions in this list. the Jaguars, for the worst team in the National Football League. Because the Detroit Lions are the best 0-3 team in the National Football League today. They're the best of the bad teams in the National Football League. Don't rip on my Detroit Lions. I'm just saying.
The Saints always seem to go on a streak every year. Most of America seems to overlook them for the first 5-6 weeks of the year. And then all of a sudden you wake up in week 12 or week 13 and you go, how'd this team get to 10-3? And how they get to 10-3 is they beat teams like the Giants, Dave. And so that's 7.5 points. I don't think the Giants are a very good team, and I'm with you. I think it's kind of a make or break time for both the quarterback and the head coach of the Giants. They got to start showing something, and quite frankly, they just don't got a lot of talent.
Yeah, I mean, these records at the end of the season in the National Football League sometimes are based on very weak foundations. My house was built in the 60s, Brad. we were remodeling, part of it, and the contractor came out and he handed me something. He said, "Hey, this might be worth something." It was a bottle of Pepsi, drinking, by the not
a sundial. I thought you were going to say or something. I found a sundial in the ceiling.
Found some sand from Egypt here. I mean, it's just the foundation of my house is poor. There's a lot of things wrong with the money pit that is my house. And a lot of these records are based on the same thing. They're based on beating bad teams. And when we get to the playoffs, we look at like a Dallas Cowboy team, it'll be like, oh, they're 12-5. They had a great year and they beat all these bad teams along the way. That creates this sort of perception of a team that's not real. And we definitely see a lot of that in the National Football League. All right, moving on, Mr. Hoysa. Browns at Vikings. I'm going to keep this extraordinarily short, believe it or not. 2.5 points. The Browns are favored with Kevin Stefanski going into Minnesota, favored by 2.5 points. I have been on and off the fence on this one for quite some time. I've tried to take my personal beliefs in the team out of it. I've tried to look at this in a very methodical, strategic way, and I actually believe that at this point, this Kirk Cousins led Minnesota Viking offense is pretty good. Brad, I'm not going to do what you think I'm going to do. I am actually going to flip and go with the Browns on this one. I have looked at this left and right, and I just I think this Kevin Stefanski is a hell of a coach. He's a coach on the rise. The running game of the of Cleveland, they now have 3 running backs to choose from. Not 1, not 2, but 3. And they can use them in different ways. And not to mention, the puppet master that is Kevin Stefanski when it comes to his control over Baker Mayfield. The Viking defense is just not there yet. They are not ready. They are going to get rolled over by this Cleveland Browns team. And on a personal note, I would love to be wrong, and I'll pass it over to you.
Well, I can't believe what I just heard because I've known Dave for a long, long time. And when the Vikings are coming off a win, he's like every other Minnesota fan on the planet. All of a sudden now we're back, right? We're back. Okay, yeah. Here's the problem with the Vikings.
I went 7-10 last week. I want to keep it going, Brad.
Yeah, here's the problem with the Vikings. They are number 32 in the league in passing percentage against them. Quarterbacks are completing 76% of their passes against this Viking defense. And although that's not a big part of what Cleveland does, they like to run the ball. that just means that they're going to be able to run the ball well, and they're going to be able to pass it well. That's how I equate it, Dave. And you know what? I think the Vikings are playing better football. We've talked about it. They very easily could be 3-0. There's no question about that. But we also talked a couple of weeks ago about how maybe the Cleveland Browns might be the second best team in football after the Chiefs. Remember that conversation?
Yeah.
And 2.5 points. I see this as a really tight game. Because the Browns don't ever seem to really blow anybody out, and the Vikings always seem to kind of be playing catch up. But I just kind of get a sense that the Vikings and Kirk Cousins have kind of overperformed a little bit offensively. I have to admit it, as much as it pains me. Kirk Cousins played really well last week.
Yeah.
They kept him upright. He had no pressure on him. He's going to see pressure this week from the Browns. And we all know what Kirk Cousins does under pressure. He falls apart. And I hate to say it, but I'm going to take the Browns to win this game. It's 2.5 points. I'm going to give the 2.5. And like you, I'll be rooting for the Vikings. But I've been sucked into that trap, Dave, for 20 plus years of just when you think the Vikings are good, they let you down. They miss a field goal. They miss an extra point. You name it. We could go on and on about this. Take the Browns. It's almost a sure bet.
Yeah, it's like The Godfather. I thought I was getting away, and it keeps pulling me back in every single time. It's like my experience with the Cowboys over the last 10 years. Looks great on paper, and the reality is something vastly different. Talk about weak foundations. They're going to have a bunch of weak. The record's going to look great, and they're not going to deliver when the playoffs come around. Look, but back to the Browns real quick. It is really for a franchise to be as down for as long as this Browns franchise was down. It is, and for them to not have the best owner in the world either. Let's face it. The owner is going to meddle at some point and screw this thing up, but it hasn't happened yet. They appear to be giving Kevin Stefanski control where he needs it. This is, a potential team that's going to be good for a really long. It is a very impressive roster across the board with what they've built. With the Cleveland Browns. Look, it's the National Football League. Stuff happens. You've got matchups on the offensive and defensive line that we haven't really gotten into. And I just, at the end of the day, believe that the holes that, the bigger running back in this particular case is going to have the opportunity to run through, which is Nick Chubb, are going to be significant. Do I think the Vikes will score a touchdown on the defensive side of the ball because Baker Mayfield throws a pick six? Yeah, I do, Brad. But at the end of the day, I still think this Browns team is going to prevail, and I probably would have taken the Browns even if they were favored by 4 or 5 points in this one.
Well, we also what the Browns did to Justin Fields last week.
Yeah.
And they turned up the heat quite a bit. I think they're number 4 or 5 in the league in passing percentage against them. The quarterbacks only throw like 60% clip or something against the Browns so far. And I think there is the added incentive for a guy like Stefanski, who was at Minnesota and now he's with the Browns. Man, he'd love to get back to Minnesota and get a win. But this is one of those weeks where Dave and I will both get a lot of hate mail.
Yeah,
a lot of our fans reside in the land of 10,000 lakes, it should be fun reading some of those emails and those messages we get. Hey, I'm going to go to my last game here because I think it is the most intriguing game of the week for many reasons. The Buccaneers are at the Patriots. We've been hearing it all week. It's Bill Belichick versus Tom Brady. It's the first time that these two guys have hooked up in a game since Brady left town. There's always been that added conversation for years and years. Why were the Patriots so good? Was it because of Brady or was it because of Belichick, the genius? And the truth is probably somewhere in between. It was the combination of the two. But I heard one thing earlier in the week. They said it's going to be like a chess match between Brady and Bill Belichick. And I thought, well, yeah, it's a chess match, but the Patriots are playing chess with a bunch of pawns, Dave. That's not a good roster, okay?
Yeah.
And Brady's got a bunch of rooks and you name any other chess piece you want to name, a queen, you name it. They're playing with the pieces that can move in different directions. The Patriots just don't have the talent. And I think that is proven out here over the last few weeks when they just haven't looked very good. The Buccaneers, I found it at 6.5. I think it's moved up to 7 ever since, but we got it at 6.5. I just feel like this is one of those games, Dave. How much would it surprise you if the fans in New England were actually rooting for the Buccaneers by the end of this game?
Yeah, that's such an interesting, I would be surprised, like, if they were, let me put it this way, rooting against the Patriots. So I could see them rooting for Tom Brady.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying.
But
I could see where Brady gets up big and all of a sudden they're cheering for him by the end of the game. I'm taking the Bucs. I'm giving the 6.5.
Yeah. I was just thinking of, like, what if Tom Brady had played for the Eagles his entire career and, it was good and won a bunch of Super Bowls and then went back with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
Well, that's a different town and a different city.
They would boo the hell out of him. They'd give him a little bit of respect at the start of the game, and then they'd boo the hell out of him after that. Look, the problems with the Patriots team, and there's a book coming out in the next, conveniently in the next week or two, about Bill Belichick, Robert Kraft, and Tom Brady, and some of the excerpts were released early in the week. I don't have them in front of me right now. But the basics on this is that, Bill Belichick is grumpy. Okay. We knew that. Robert Kraft is, he's your eccentric, billionaire, and Tom Brady's the quarterback from California, a good looking quarterback from California. The bottom line here is that there's just way too much firepower on this Tampa Bay Buccaneer team for them to lose this game if they're coached well, which you and I believe sometimes can be an issue with Bruce Arians. And I do believe in Bill Belichick as a head coach, but if we're just being realistic and we look at the draft picks from the last 4 or 5 years for the Patriots, like, how many of those players have even panned out? I'm talking about the second, third, and fourth rounders. Like, one maybe. They've done an absolutely horrific job. That is why they actually spent so much money on free agency this year, because all of their scouting and draft picks as an organization has actually failed over the last 4 or 5 years. And let's face it, really, really good quarterbacks who have nicknames like the GOAT, can put a lot of Band-Aids on a lot of places on a football team. And you see it across the National Football League. And this is one of those things. I absolutely believe this is a Bucs win. And I'm happy to give up the points to prove it.
Yeah, I mean, on paper, how many points is Tom Brady versus Mac Jonesworth? I mean, that alone is a couple touchdowns, right?
Yeah.
And so, and the rest of the lineup is better for Tampa. The only question about Tampa is whether or not that defense is finally going to show up. I just don't think the New England offense has got a lot. I don't see this being a close football game at all. And like I said, I wouldn't be shocked at all if the fans were cheering for Brady by the middle of the third quarter. And, they're kind of bitter fans out there. They're kind of jokesters, and, they're going to be really jacked up for this one. But a lot of those people out there, Dave, love Tom Brady. Don't kid yourself. And, this could be kind of a humbling and embarrassing moment for Bill Belichick. I've said that many times. I've had to, eat my words many times with this guy. I just think on paper it's a lopsided game.
Yeah, it absolutely is. Like one of the craziest things I heard all week was because there's so much hype around this game, and obviously it's the Sunday night football game, and they're rolling out Al Michaels and Chris Collinsworth for it, and they have like 18 broadcasters covering this game. It's ridiculous. Anyways, how many Collinsworths are on the broadcast now? They seem to be multiplying, Brad. So you just sort of like but the most ridiculous thing I heard, I think, all week was that, Tom Brady was going to be nervous. Tom Brady was going to be emotional. He was going to be so emotional. It was going to be so difficult for him to play in this game. I was like, most ridiculous. I could see him being, a little emotional when he walks through the tunnel and all of that. But man, once that game starts, come on, just absolutely ridiculous.
Well, part of what makes Tom Brady great is that he's an emotional player. And so they tell me he's emotional. I'm happier now than I was 5 minutes ago that I took the Buccaneers. So
yeah,
I hope they're right. I hope he is emotional.
This particular person was saying he was going to be so distraught that he wasn't going to be able to focus because of his emotions. It's ridiculous. All right, I'm moving on to our last game, and hopefully I have saved the best for last. The Cardinals at the Los Angeles Rams. Brad, I just realized this is the first weekend where SoFi Stadium is getting both the Rams and the Chargers. They get the Rams on Sunday and they get the Chargers on Monday. I feel like John Madden pointing out the obvious. That was a running back, and the running back, you see, gets the football when the quarterback hands the ball to him. Anyways, so in this particular game, Rams are favored by 4.5. I've admitted where I think Dave DeBall was wrong when it came to Matthew Stafford a little bit earlier in the week. Sean McVay, is once again, it had been a while, but now that he got rid of Jared Goff, he is once again the chosen one. Every young coach in the National Football League should model Sean McVay. Run after your players after they score touchdowns. Look, this Rams team is firing on all cylinders. There is not a weakness anywhere on this team that has really shown up to be significant in all three phases of the game. I'm not saying they can't be beat. I'm not saying they're going to win the Super Bowl, but through 3 weeks of the National Football League season, they are playing the best in the NFL today. This is a hot Cardinal team that's coming in. This is a Cardinal team that you can score a lot of points against. This is going to be a high scoring affair. But for the first time this season, the Arizona Cardinals are actually going to be going up against a real defensive front. And I just don't, I'm sure Kyler will, pass for 280 yards, maybe rush for 40 or 50 yards. But this isn't going to be a 400 and 500 yard game, passing and running for Kyler. The Rams will spy him and shut him down enough to win by at least 4.5 in this one.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, I think, I don't remember if it was this year or last year where I saw where Sean McVay has kind of got the Cardinals number. They played him in January. And I think Murray didn't play the whole game, but the Rams beat the Cardinals 18-7. It's just a defense that kind of seems to rise to games like this. If you strike the least little bit of fear in them and tell them, hey, you got to watch out for Kyler Murray. He's the guy that could break you down. They seem to have one of those defenses that kind of take things personally. Even though there's a lot of chatter now about the Rams being one of the better teams, I think they are one of the better teams. I don't think the Cardinals are one of the better teams in football. I still think they're a bubble team to make the playoffs. They were a last-second fielder was away from losing to the Vikings, who I think are an average football team. And I just thought that this line, they came in for us. What was it, Dave? It was 4.5. I thought was a little bit low. I think if it had been 5.5 or 6, I might have still taken the Rams. So I see 4.5 point line, a defense that is clicking on all cylinders. Kyler Murray, still a young guy that I think the Rams have the kind of defensive personnel that can clamp down on a guy like Kyler Murray. I'm going to take the Rams. I'm going to give the 4.5. I'm with you on that one.
Yeah.
And by the way, I think I agreed with you on. Let me see. I think we agreed on 4 of your 5 games, Dave. So
we agreed on 8 out of 10 games today.
Go figure.
We have 2 games that we didn't agree on at all.
I couldn't get you to pick those Steelers, Dave.
No. It's just too early. Hey, Brad, I was going to ask just one quick selfish question for you. When Kevin Stefanski was the offensive coordinator in Minnesota for a little while, not a long time, but just a little while, because remember he was an assistant. He didn't really get the chance to be an offensive coordinator. But when he was, did you think brilliant young head coach?
I didn't. I didn't know much about him, in all honesty. When they hired him, I thought, well, good riddance. The Vikings are getting rid of one of their offensive coaches. But he has proven me wrong. He's looked, he's brought what was a really good running game in Minnesota to Cleveland, a team that really has better personnel up front. And, I think he's kind of brought Mayfield along smartly, if that's a word. Baker Mayfield has a tendency to get a little crazy and try to make plays that aren't there, much like a Brett Favre sort of guy.
Yeah.
But he knows his bread and butter, and then he knows he can run the football. He's got a good defense. And like you said earlier, they got really good personnel there in Cleveland. So I like what he's done there. But no, I did not see the name. I didn't even know the guy.
Yeah. And, he'd been with the team for a long time as a member of the coaching staff. And so I was aware of that. But like at no point did Kevin Stefanski leaving scare me, but look, if you just look at the performance of this team since he's been gone, it's pretty obvious that he absolutely knew what he was doing as an offensive coordinator. All right, well, that is it for this week's Gods of Odds. I just want to remind everybody we've been 7-10 2 weeks in a row. We'll see if we can keep it going. Brad and I actually disagree on just 2 games this week, which is probably never happened in the historic history of the Gods of Odds, Brad. I'm just
very surprised. I don't remember us ever agreeing this much in one particular. I'm a little fearful, quite frankly.
All right. Well, thanks everybody for tuning in. Make sure you do check out our Big Sports website when you have a chance at mighty.rip. For Brad Hoysef over there in beautiful Southern California, I'm Dave DeBoff in Northern California. Wishing everybody out there a tremendous rest of your sports viewing week.
God here, and thanks for tuning in to the Gods of Odds. For more semi-witty sports commentary, please make sure you check out mighty.rip. Okay, go ahead and kill the music now.